Hi, hello, welcome back to a brand new episode of Two Please. I'm your host, Abhin.
And I'm your co host, Rohit. And today we're going to talk about the 2024 Edward Berger film Conclave because of recent events, essentially the passing of the Pope Francis 3 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago. The movie has seen a surge in interest. In fact, Amazon Prime saw a 283% increase in search volumes for the movie. Back in public consciousness came out a little over a year ago or almost over a year ago. So yeah, that's the movie we're going to be discussing. And without further ado, let's start the show. Here's a breakdown of how our episodes usually go, right? So we're going to spend a couple of minutes on first impressions of the movie that we're discussing, a couple of minutes on any behind the scenes stories that we might have, a couple more minutes on memorable moments, could be dialogue, scenes, I don't know, happenings in the film. And then we spend a fair chunk of our time really diving deep into the themes of the film and if we're looking at certain themes, not just of the movie and the story, but characteristics of the director and just things around it where we want to go a little deeper, right? So we're going to discuss that for a fair bit of time, and then we have something, a sort of surprise to end the episode with, for which you'll have to stick around. But that's roughly how all our episodes go, and the sort of themes that we intend to discuss on this episode today, given that this is a movie about the Catholic Church and how they elect their Pope. So we're going to dive a little into the history of the Catholic Church, talk about how religion plays a role in the social contract that we as a society are expected to honor, the ambiguity of religion, what it has offered over the years, what it looks like in the future, where does atheism and humanity sit in all of this equation, where does science come in, and all of these are themes that come from the movie, right? This is not
Yeah.
just us pulling it out of our ass. So uh, the theme section, especially of this movie, as I told Abhin on chat when we decided to do this movie, I said, I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm going to go a little heavy on this one, but that's what's in store. But before we jump the gun too much, Abhin, what are your first impressions of the movie?
I think it's a taut drama. It's something that I would definitely consider in the vein of movies like The Ides of March, or basically any sort of films that deal with elections of some sort. And the premise is pretty straightforward, right? It's about basically the dean who's questioning his faith. He's having a moment of crisis, and that's when the pope dies and he's in charge of the conclave, which is essentially the only responsibility that somebody in his position has. And what follows is like a lot of scheming, of him having to navigate a lot of the scheming, a lot of backstabbing, and finally electing somebody who is a honest representation of what he intends the church to be. I thought it was a great time. I like Edward Berger. I liked All Quiet on the Western Front. This is the second film that I've seen, and boy, man, is here to stay.
I agree with you, right? Cliff Notes, great cinematography and great music, and the
Beautiful
music of
score.
this film, the score is very similar. I don't know if it's the same composer. It's very similar in its cadence to All Quiet on the Western Front.
Hmm.
Silences with crescendos, then silence again. So really enjoyed the treatment of the film. The story in and of itself is a little pulpy. The whole conclave is very mean girly, where a bunch of catty cardinals fighting it out to come out on top. This could very easily have been an out and out comedy as well. It really comes down to treatment. It could very well be a farcical comedy, and just as easily the drama that we get, right? So again, I won't go into the themes too much, but I really enjoyed watching it. Engrossing, very easily watchable, lovely cinematography, blocking, colors, all of it. So I would say slightly stronger on the visual side than narrative, but the topic itself lends itself to a lot of discussion. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. So those are my first impressions.
So Conclave, where does it sit in the pantheon of movies where the Pope dies? I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of one, which is Angels and Demons,
Definitely
where
better than the movie. in
Yeah,
these
definitely. I
endings.
think Into the Demons, the book is probably Dan Brown's best, in my opinion. I don't know. People love the Da Vinci
Hmm.
Code. I am a big fan of Into the Demons. But the movie, oh, I absolutely hated it. The biggest crime it committed, apart from being weak, was Hans Zimmer's score, which was atrocious. And you don't really say that about Hans Zimmer much anyway these days. There's another 1991 movie called The Pope Must Die. Sounds like Romeo Must Die, which
Yeah,
stars Robbie Coltrane, and it's a comedy where the Pope dies unexpectedly, leading to the election of a very unlikely candidate. So it's a satirical take. So I mean, you could say, like you were talking about Conclave being like this could have been a comedy.
yeah.
We have the year we were born, there was one somebody who already had the same idea, and I think the
And when we
two.
discuss the themes, again, I'm going to withhold myself.
Hmm,
There have been papal elections which feel satirical or farcical, but they actually happened, right?
yeah,
So it's all been done in reality as well.
the next one is I think what the two popes, which is the Jude Law film. No, that's the young pope. This is the one with what's his name with
Uh,
Jonathan Spector
Anthony
and
Hopkins and Jonathan Price.
Price. Sorry, Jonathan Spector.
Jonathan Price,
John.
who is a splitting image of Pope Francis. I remember
Yeah.
when Pope Francis was elected, people were like, biopic when?
So, which again is about when a pope dies, and I
No, they didn't. Hey, Joseph Ratzinger retired.
no,
he,
this is
he
based
died in.
on John Paul II's death, and
No,
it's
no,
in the
no. This is Ratzinger and Pope Francis handover. So Ratzinger
Hmm,
retired and he wanted to appoint his successor. That's why he
okay.
spent time with Pope Francis. Ratzinger
Hmm.
died in 2022. Pope Francis
And
took
that
over
I
in
know.
2018.
Yeah, why did Ratzinger decide? But anyway, that Ratzinger is something else. No, he's called Benedict something.
Pope Benedict,
Hmm,
yes.
yeah. Okay. No, I'm clearly conflating my, or confusing my two popes trivia. But okay, that's to do with the kind of films that exist in this particular genre. BTS stories. Let's quickly jump into this. They asked to shoot this in the Sistine Chapel, and the Sistine Chapel said no. So they essentially used the Sistine Chapel set, or they built the same set where the two popes were shot. And they also, I mean, basically went around a bunch of places in Europe with these older chapels and older cathedrals, and shot there wherever they got permission as well. One such place they shot in was a castle in Italy. So it's the conversation where they're walking down a set of stairs, and I was like, I've seen this before, and then I didn't think much of it. And then I opened up Twitter not so much later on in the day, and it was there. It they are both There are two scenes from two separate films. One was in 1999, one in 2024, and they're both shot in the same place, except that one is a movie about the church and the other is a movie about Star Wars. So the Phantom Menace was also shot in the same place, and it's kind of ironic, and it's the exact same shot with the exact kind of blocking as as the characters walk down the staircase, which I found to be quite funny.
One last point on the Sistine Chapel thing. They weren't allowed to shoot inside. Not just that, you're not allowed to take pictures inside the Sistine Chapel. Even today, when you visit, and there's only one Japanese company that's been given the contract to sort of take photos which are then sold and distributed, etc. So it's some license thing. So it's not just movie producers. Even us people, if we were to go into Sistine Chapel, can't take photos of it. Cool. So those were our BTS stories. Let's quickly jump into the memorable moments. What parts of the movie really stood out to you, Abhin?
My favorite moment in the entire film is Lawrence's speech, just as the conclave is
Yeah,
about to begin.
same, same.
Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt.
At that moment is where the film truly clicked for me, much before any of the politics and all of the other sort of story elements come into play. I found this to be a quite profound moment for somebody who has, like, for years struggled with the idea of faith and what to believe and what not to believe. Um, I have found the justification of it, like from this lens, to be quite interesting.
I agree with you. His homily was probably far and away my favorite scene in the film. It's an encapsulation of the movie's message. Uh, Another memorable moment, again, without giving away too many spoilers, is the sort of bombastic event that happens towards the end of the film. It's shot very beautifully. Um, Again, with Edward Berger, this is sort of expected. I know the he's only a couple of movies old, but you see where his eye is, right? He has a great sense of moments. He has a great sense of when to use slow mo, when to great sense of scale, and even though it's a fake set, you are essentially working with the Sistine Chapel. He knows how to use that as best as possible. So again, a great scene. Followed immediately the damage. Again, I'm trying to give as few spoilers away as possible. Because of damage, you have this sunlight pouring in, and again, uh, not so much a memorable moment, but something that really stuck with me was the cinematography of the film. Two scenes essentially exceptionally stood out for me, or three, I would say. One is, again, like I said, the sunlight falling into the Sistine Chapel, the way it's shot, the way that scene is lit, blocked, staged, everything outstanding. Then there's a top view of all of the cardinals walking around the fountain with their white umbrellas, and
Yes.
there's hints of their red tunic, not the tunic, the belt around or whatever they wear, right? You see a bit of that around the white umbrellas, and just these umbrellas. It's a very handmade, stale, meet some surreal. It feels otherworldly. The image is oversaturated. It looks crazy.
Yeah, I think even the costume designer kind of pointed this out. She really wanted the red to stand. So, and I think the garb that the cardinals wear, it's not something they wear today. It's not the same shade of red. In fact, it's a couple of centuries old, and she used that as she thought it would, with regards to how it would look on screen, it would definitely have that striking impact, which it does.
Yeah.
And like that shot is beautiful.
Yeah, that, and there's the last shot that I wanted to mention where Rail finds is sitting on a bench. Uh, he's in red, or he's in white. No, he's in red, and all the pillars and the flooring around him is white. I was like, who comes up, like, who imagines these visuals, right? Like, insane. The cinematography is more than anything else. The cinematography and the music is what stood out to me in terms of memorable moments. Of course, there's the one other one, again, without giving away too many spoilers. There's a confrontation between one of the cardinals and Thomas Lawrence
Hmm.
in the cafeteria slash mess area, which in the movie is a serious event, but the cadence or the flow of the scene again has a humorous element to it. There's another cardinal who's intently watching this and vaping in to the side, which when I was watching the movie, it elicited a laugh from me. So again, that was a very not a memorable scene, but a very engaging one. I really enjoyed that scene a lot. I think that's fair to say.
There are a fair few more, but I don't want to get into it if we're not doing spoilers. Especially there's one with a pope crying, and one of the pope elects essentially crying. The cardinal starts weeping, and
Ooh, yeah.
yeah, which was I thought a very powerful scene. And of course the big twist at the end, which I found to be like I didn't see it coming. I was like, what am I missing? And then it dawns on you, and you're like, oh, holy hell, this is. I mean, sorry, I'm being blasphemous. I'm like, wow, this is
Yeah.
this is kind of
It's a
insane.
great twist, but it's also there's a very Dan Brown pulpy twist. This
Mm,
You get what I'm saying? That this
I know
is
what you mean.
the sort of, I don't want to call it lurid, but it is pulpy. That's the only way I would put it. It's not bad, but
Hmm.
it's mm, I don't know. It's not lowbrow. Pulpy is the only word I can think of. Right? This will never happen in real life. Let's put it that way. You can tell this is a story that way, but it's great. I don't think you can anticipate it. I don't think you can predict it. It is definitely going to come out of left field. But yeah,
Speaking of
also
predict,
yeah.
the urban legend around this movie that this movie ultimately predicts the death of Pope Francis,
How is that?
because the Pope that dies in the film stays in an apartment, and if I
Oh
could,
yeah,
yeah, and Pope Francis was the only one who stayed in an apartment.
he
Everybody
didn't
else
stay
had
in
a
the
different
papal
residence.
rooms.
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
papal
yeah,
rooms.
yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a bunch. It's like it's alluded to the fact that it was in fact Pope Francis like who had or somebody like extremely like similar to him that was the person who died. And
Hmm.
there are hints sprinkled throughout the film.
I thought the only predictor of Pope Francis's death was JD Vance, but that's besides the point.
I was saving that for the end of the episode, but okay, go on. Mm,
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I'll let you take that towards the
mm.
end. But yeah, these were some of the memorable moments. Now let's get into the theme section. This is where I really want to dive in. For those of you who have watched our episode or heard our episode on 1917, you may recall I went down this nerdy rabbit hole around World War One. So when Abhin had said we discuss this movie, I remember telling him I'm going to do a 1917 on this one because I have a lot to say. But before I do that, before I start talking ad infinitum, ad nauseum, however you want to call it, Abhin, anything you want to add?
No, man, the
Anything you
floor
want
is
to cover?
yours. By all, take it away.
Okay, so let me first. So before we get into the religious side of things, right? I want to spend a minute on the etymology of the term. So
Mhm.
when we're talking about the conclave, what does this mean? And for a fair few of us, at least for me, it was our first exposure to the whole ceremony of a conclave was probably Angels and Demons, either the movie or the book. At least for
Yeah,
me, it was the whole white
it,
smoke, black smoke, the whole.
it it wasn't for me though. I must like was
You
that
were
your
part
first
of the
experience?
last conclave.
No, my first experience of the elections of the of the death of the Pope and the election of a new Pope was Eurotrip, where they
Okay, I don't remember this.
where Eurotrip where he stumbles into like the papal residency and sets the a curtain on fire, and then it basically
Oh,
is
right.
black smoke that goes up, and then there's a white smoke that goes up later, and they're like, "Oh, new pope has been elected." You know what happens in the space of 20 minutes. So that was my first what do you call uh, insight into
Introduction
what
to the
the
whole. Yeah.
conclave aspect. Yeah.
Except for fans of Eurotrip, I'm guessing for the most part that was people's introduction to conclave. And essentially, the word conclave comes from conclavus, which means with a key. What that means is, by design, the conclave is supposed to be behind closed doors. So you are supposed to lock it and take the key away, or rather, it is done with lock and key, is what conclave means, right? So it is supposed to be behind closed doors. The idea is to almost force the cardinals to make a decision as to who the next pope will be, so that the mourning period is not too long. People are forced to sort of come back to action. Things have to move, as the show must go on, as they say. And they didn't want the cardinals to take too long, right? In fact, there have been a couple of papal elections. I'm not sure of the exact dates. Probably somewhere in the 10th century there was one, 10th or 11th, where the popes were taking too long, and to kind of force them to make a decision, they started withholding food. They
Oh
reduced
man.
their food to just bread and water, and I think just one fish, so that you're sort of nudging them, saying, hey, stop fucking around, like pick the next pope. And when that didn't work, they took the roof of the church, of the chapel. I think Sistine Chapel wasn't there then exactly, but whichever church they were at, right? They took the roof off, so that, again, another way of making them more uncomfortable. Uh, Basically to say, hey, get to the point sooner. So there have been fascinating stories around the conclave historically. Again, quick side note here. Sorry, the nerd in me is coming out, but clavis, which is Roman Latin for key, is also where the word clavicle comes from, which is the bone we have here.
Oh man.
Which, because it looks like a key, is why we have the bone called clavicle. But again, I digress. Let me come back. So that's the origin of the conclave. For a long time, this has been one of the mainstays of Roman Catholicism. Now, coming to the history of the Catholic Church in and of itself, right? And before I get into it, a disclaimer: I am I am an atheist. I do not profess any particular religion. I believe in science because I can only place my faith in things that are measurable, repeatable, uh, and if something does not meet these two criteria, for me that is not something I can take for granted, as gospel truth, calling it gospel truth. But anyways, I want to talk about the history of the Catholic Church, because uh, or Christianity at large, right? Because for the law, the Catholic Church is the oldest denomination. A lot of the other denominations are offshoots of the Catholic Church. The reason I want to talk about it is, or rather, I want to talk about the transactional history of the Catholic Church, and I'm using my words very carefully, right? Because compared to maybe other religions, when I look at, say, Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and even to a certain extent Islam, the growth and evolution of these religions have been a lot more organic. In the case of Jainism and Buddhism, there have been very specific polemic figures who have put down very specific scriptures that have acted as focal points around which the religion has grown. uh, and yes, there have been, meetings or councils of scholars of the religion to debate ecumenical, and when I say ecumenical, I mean to debate certain aspects of this religion. People have had to come together and uh, arrive at a common consensus, right? Which is to say, what is our collective viewpoint on XYZ topics? I know Buddhism has had a whole bunch of these regularly. Jainism has had these. Hinduism has had these. I'm not so sure about Islam. My knowledge is a little short on that front, but I'm sure in the golden age of Islam, which was, in the Baghdad Caliphate and all, I'm sure they had their fair share of religious debates. The same applies to the Catholic Church as well, right? There have been 7 ecumenical councils in the Catholic Church. The first of which was in 325 AD. It was the Council of Nicaea, which was put together by the Roman Emperor Constantine the First, where there were very specific topics on the agenda, right? So, what do we feel about X? What do we feel about Y? And Christianity has very consciously, and again, I'm using my words very deliberately, has very consciously co opted a lot of pagan traditions to make Christianity more easy to swallow for new converts from paganism to Christianity, right? Easter is a modification of Passover, right? Passover is a Jewish festival. Easter, if I'm not mistaken, falls around the same time. The idea to put Easter around Passover was one of the points that was discussed in the first council of Nicaea.
Hmm.
Uh, and then even Christmas, Jesus Christ's birthday being supposed to have been on 25th December is by design, because that's around the time when the pagans celebrated winter solstice. So again, one of these groups, I think around 336 AD is when the Roman Empire officially said Jesus Christ's birthday is on December 25th. And the whole idea was to say this makes it easier for even pagans. They're already celebrating festivals around these days. We'll just say, hey, even Christianity celebrates the same thing around these times, right? So it makes it
Hmm.
easier for them to swallow the pill. So what I'm trying to say is, there is, in my opinion, I could be wrong. Happy to hear opposing views. There is a far more deliberate and inorganic attempt to make Christianity more palatable, to make it more a religion of the masses.
Hmm.
Now, whether that is right or wrong is a matter of opinion, right? I am not going to get into that. I am just stating facts, right?
Yeah.
So this is the factual history of the Catholic Church. They have consciously taken these steps to, and successfully so, right? It is, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not talking about the Catholic denomination, but Christianity is the largest religion in the world. So for whatever reasons, it's not just a success of the church. There's imperialism behind it. There's a whole other bunch of factors, but it is the largest religion in the world, right? So there is this whole deliberate aspect to it. And when I say transactional, and I was mentioning, right, there have been a couple of conclaves which have been an absolute farce. The most egregious of them, or the most standout among them, is the ascendancy of Pope Alexander the Sixth, who was from the Borgia family. The Borgias were this. rich Spanish family who, in the Renaissance, had gotten very rich and started exerting influence in Italy as well, specifically in Rome and Rome and Florence. And in fact, they had butted heads with the Medici and a whole bunch of the Sforzas, a whole bunch of prominent Italian families as well. But again, I digress. Coming back, so Borgias, maybe fairly, maybe unfairly, over time, have built a reputation for being a very sinful family. A lot of drinking, a lot of sexual escapades. There are whispers of incest. So one of the members
True,
of
true,
this
yeah.
family, yeah, essentially bought the papacy, right? Now, whether, even if we keep aside all of the lewd accusations that were laid on the Borgia family, fact remain that somebody who, yes, he was a cardinal. He was one of the youngest cardinals at the age of 27, I think.
Rodrigo Borgia, no? Is that if I'm not mistaken?
Rodrigo Borgia, that's his name.
Hmm.
Rodrigo Borgia. Essentially, he bribed
I'll
his
never
way to
forget
the
Rodrigo
papacy
Borgia. I'll never forget him.
because of Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
also why, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So Rodrigo Borgia essentially bought his way into the papacy, and his papal reign is characterized with corruption. Is characterized, again. Some of these details may be salacious, untrue. I don't know, but there were orgies, there was a lot of corruption, there was a lot of crime, etc., etc. Right. So again, maybe debatable how much of it is true, but we know this happened. Right. So again, whether this, for me as an atheist, all religion is to an extent illogical.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yes, this tarnishes the reputation of the purity of the Catholic Church for me. But that's far from the worst things they've done, right? The child abuse scandal and stuff. This is 600 years ago, so I'm not going to
Yeah.
rake them over the coals for it. But speaking of the transactional history of the church, the last point and the most obvious and most undeniable point, right, is the concept of indulgences. For those of you who are not aware of what indulgences are, because they were a power player, even militarily speaking, the church would often need to raise money, right? Because many times they would also fund king's campaigns. Most notably, the Crusades of King Richard, for example, right? When
Hmm.
he went to Jerusalem to get the holy city back, etc. A lot of his money came from the church. But when the church was, given that they were often in times of needing to raise capital, a very useful tool that the church found was indulgences. What an indulgence basically was, that, say, if you have been created performed some sin, right? Say you jacked off on a Sunday and you shouldn't have, right? So what what you could do is go to your priest and buy an indulgence. So you pay money to your priest, and he says, here's an indulgence, some form of written paper or whatever, saying buying this indulgence absolves you of the
But
sin of
your
jacking off
sin,
on a
yeah.
Sunday.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you can also buy future indulgences. So you're like, no, next Sunday also I want to jack off. So I want to buy now only. So I can already plan my next weekend, right? Give me for Saturday as well, right? So you can buy advance indulgence. So the sale of, so you see what you're doing? You're selling absolution, which conceptually I'm just like, what the fuck, right? And it wasn't just me who said what the fuck. The other famous person who said what the fuck was Martin Luther, which is how the Protestant
I was
stream
about
of
to get into it.
Christianity came to be.
Hmm. Yeah.
The 95 Theses that Martin Luther nailed to the church in, I'm forgetting which city it was.
Hmm.
Uh, the core disagreement he had was with the sale of indulgences. So the long-winded point that I'm trying to make is that, however much people may like or dislike it, the history of the Catholic Church is transactional, is by design, is very planned, premeditated, has had its brush with immorality, sin, which is not to say other religions haven't, right? But
No, of
since we're
course not.
talking about conclave,
No,
I
I'm
just
saying
wanted to bring this point.
because let's say the Crusades were what year?
I mean, there were three main ones. One was in the 9th century, one was in the
Hmm.
11th, and the Next was in the 12th or 13th, I'm forgetting. But the second crusade is the where all the main characters come from. Saladin, King Richard. Or,
All of these from that. So, and by then, the church had already had a strong influence, pretty much a stronghold on European civilization. Given, I think, what this,
absolutely.
yeah. So this is it makes sense purely from a religion trying to garner influence, right? That's essentially what happened over centuries,
Yeah.
where they would just slowly integrate themselves into organizations with power, then basically have influence over periods, and then eventually start to take over the lives of people. I think that's what really changed, rather solidified their stronghold, was because religion comes is extremely beneficial, or rather, it almost always works for people that are having an extremely difficult time in life. If you'll notice, people who are really going through it, they ultimately almost always turn to religion because they consider it to be a cornerstone around which they're able to find some sort of strength and solace. Now we have so much information, and it's still extremely prevalent today as well in today's society as well. But back then, going over 300, 400 years ago, when there wasn't a lot of information around, and essentially, quite literally, when the Catholic Church's word was gospel, you had nowhere to turn. It was either like,
Yeah.
even when kings and monarchs were uh, influenced by the Catholic Church, um, it made perfect sense as to why um, the downtrodden, or people who had no power, who had no money, would place such belief in the church, because they felt like it was a place that would look after them, and that all the suffering in life that they currently were going through would eventually be justified towards the end.
Yeah, no, in fact, that sort of leads into the other big point that I want to talk about, right?
Hmm.
And before I go into the second of my 10 to 15-minute long rants, the other point I just quickly want to add is, again, this is just my point of view, but across the board, across the regions I've seen, and that is something that is very clearly shown in this film, is that regardless of religion, right at the top, the people who are fighting it out right at the top are operating on very undivine base human desires. There's naked aggression, ambition, undercutting, lies, deception, very unreligious, undivine attributes. But I think men of power, regardless of whether it's religion, business, whatever, men of power are not holy, right?
No, that comes right. Morality very rarely walks hand in hand with ambition.
That's something that the movie has almost sort of hammers you over the head with, but I don't mind. It's a great message for our people to remember, right? But
Hmm.
yeah, jumping into the next big point that I am literally rubbing my hands in anticipation. But this was while the first part was more a history lesson on the Catholic Church, this is the philosophical core of the film that I really want to talk about, right? And like you said, in memorable moments, a lot of this thought in my head was generated because of Thomas Lawrence's homily on doubt in religion versus certainty, right? Uh, if I were to take a step back, and again, all of this is just my point of view, people can, dismiss it if they want to, but I know a number of episodes I have alluded to the whole concept of the social contract, right? Again, not my creation. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is probably the one who should be credited with it. But what the social contract essentially means is this implicit understanding, or this implicit agreement we all make in a society, right? That these are the things, and when I say implicit, this is not taught to us. This is at an instinctual level, we sort of know, right? That this is okay to do and this is not okay to do, because if I keep doing things that are not okay to do, I cannot coexist with other people, right? That innate understanding is the social contract. And when I say innate, we're not born with it, but at the same time, we're not it's not like it's taught to us in school, other than we used to have moral science in school and stuff, but it's not taught to us in school. You observe how people around you behave, and it just you you absorb it, right? I don't know how else to put it. It just you learn it instinctually. But there are, in my mind, there are three lies at the heart of the social contract, right? The first lie is the capitalist lie. The lie at the heart of capitalism in the context of the social contract is that you and I and each one of us are entirely in charge of our destiny, right?
Hmm.
In other words, in the US, it is sold as the American dream, which is to say that if you work hard and if you're meritorious, you will achieve success, right? Meritocracy is the lie of the capitalist system. Why is it a lie? For two reasons. One, there are powers that be at the top. If things happen that are not in their interest, even if it is the right thing to be done, or even if it is something you deserve, if you disrupt the powers that be, they will go out of their way to make sure you don't achieve what you're setting out to. This is an external force that meritocracy as a promise does not tell us about, does not account for. The other thing is randomness or entropy, right? Which is to say, even if you do everything right, even if you do everything that is in your control, 100% right, things that are not in your control can always derail everything, right? This is a concept that even Morgan Hauser in his book Power of Money talks about, right? And as somebody who has started his own company, this is a thought, this is a reality that I live with every day, right? Things that are in my control, I can do them every day. I can do 100%, and still my company could fail 2 3 years down the line, fail abjectly for reasons I could not have controlled at any point, right?
Yeah.
Capitalism's promise does not make mention of that. It tells you you are in control. And when reality hits, and when you realize there are things out of your control that have major impact on your life, this is where religion comes in, right? The point that you were making, which is
Hmm.
that the biggest comfort that religion gives us is to say that, or the hope that it gives us is that we have some degree of control on even the uncertain, not direct control, but if we pray to a god, the god will indirectly help us influence the uncertain elements and
Hmm.
allow us to get that prosperity we want, right? So this brings me to the second lie of the social contract, which is the lie that religion allows you to control the uncontrollable, right?
Yeah.
That is the lie at the heart of religion. All religions tell what is the promise of god. The promise of god is, if you are facing hardship, or if you are striving for or seeking some sort of success, and you're not able to get that regardless of everything that you can humanly do, pray to me, or pray to my form of my version of god, and it will
Hmm.
help you control the uncontrollable. That is the lie. That is the second lie, right, of the social contract, which is the lie at the heart of religion. The third lie is the communal aspect. I don't know what the right word for it is, but the lie that, again, this also has is tied into capitalism, and capitalism celebrates the individual over the commune, right?
Hmm.
And the third lie here is to say that if you as an individual can do everything that is in your power, you don't necessarily need the collective, right? You should always place yourself before the larger collective. um, and again, this is because the social contract concept primarily comes from the west. If you ask the same question in eastern cultures, in India, in Japan, in Southeast Asia, this does not exist. The eastern cultures put the community above the individual. Western civilizations by and large are a little more individualistic. But again, their own experiences in the past have shown that you cannot function this way, right? I was listening to a recent podcast the other day where somebody was trying to set up a new colony, and everyone, this was somewhere in the Polynesian islands, and all of the colonizers there were like, I need to get mine. They got their plot of land, they tried to farm their plot of land, build their house, without thinking of what community are we building. And in 2 years, they all starved to death.
Isn't this I mean, going back a couple of generations, isn't this the same philosophy through which Columbus and the Spanish Inquisition happened? Because I think Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about this is quite a popular story about how Columbus was aware of an eclipse happening, and he was bargaining with the natives somewhere, and he
Yeah.
said, um, "It's like if you don't agree to my terms, I will turn your sun red in the space of a week." And
I don't know if it was
come
Columbus or Pizarro. I think it was
Pizarro
Francisco
was the
Pizarro.
that's the Spanish Inquisition.
Incas.
Yeah,
But
that's
there must be Columbus. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, that's that
But I know
I was
the
looking,
eclipse story. Yeah,
huh,
yeah.
which is the Columbus story, and the Spanish Inquisition one was about how his god is a better god and a more modern god compared to what the Incas were worshipping at the time, and
Yeah.
that led to like brutality, right? Like a lot of the in the name of religion is where they said they were allowed to commit blatant acts of genocide.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. That. So you see how the three lies are intertwined, and the resultant violence that comes from the when reality hits and people realize that they've been conned in these three forms. The resultant violence is inextricable with religion. It is inextricable with capitalism. It's inextricable with the communities we build, right? uh, and given this backdrop, again, and this is again my view as somebody who uh, worships the pedestal of science. uh, this is where science can come and strip these lies of their deceit, right? It can shine a light, it can make it clear, which is why I keep saying, right, I only believe, and this is a debate I've had with my parents are gracious enough where, a lot of times you come out to Indian parents as an atheist, you just get shut down. They've never been like that. They've always engaged in dialogue. They both believe, and they're like, you tell us why this thing, right? So my argument with them, the core of it boils down to, is it measurable? Is it repeatable? If it's not, then I cannot believe in it. I'm sorry, right? And that brings me to what science does in opposition to religion, right? And which is, like you said, over the years religion offered us a means of controlling what we couldn't otherwise control or measure or even understand,
Hmm.
let alone
Yeah.
control, right? Now, if you go back 3,000, 4,000 years, see, even before Christianity, right, when you had the Sumerians and you had the princess Enheduanna, who was the first recorded priest in human history. One of the first poems she's the first recorded poetess in human history, sorry. So one of the first poems she's written about is how the moon rises at night, and it is ridden by a chariot. That's why it travels across the sky. So things we can't understand, we usually attribute to something celestial, something cosmic, and that's common to all religions. So this is the comfort that religion offered us in the absence of knowledge. And science, which is essentially knowledge, concrete knowledge, over the time or over the years continually strips this away from religion, right? And I think in Angels and Demons, or one of the Dan Brown books, he alludes to this theme. He says what science has done over the years is it has almost emasculated religion, right? By taking its mystery away, uh, people don't care as much about religion today, because they're like, hey, you said you can do XYZ things for me. You
Hmm.
said this is how XYZ things operated. Science is
Hmm.
clearly showing this is all bullshit, right?
Hmm.
So, like, what the fuck, right? So, in that sense, science and religion are opposing forces, which brings me back to Lawrence's homily, right? When he said, doubt is what gives us faith, and certainty is what is the enemy of unity and tolerance. For me, science is certainty, and for me, religion, or rather, doubt is fundamental to religion because religion helps solve doubt. And
Hmm.
to me, as a man of science, I'm like, to say that it is um, certainty is the enemy of unity and tolerance is not true, because if you take a scientific approach to things, religion has equal power to divide. And for him to say beautiful lines, but that
Hmm.
ignores the history of religion and its divisive power, right? And science has been a great leveler in so many more ways. So while his words are beautiful, while his words are very thought provoking, and while I understand in isolation doubt plays a very important role in religion, certainty is an enemy of religious progress. but it is a huge driver of overall progress, right? Doubt is only going to hold us back.
Yeah.
So again, beautiful words, very thought provoking, but I do not agree with that line of thought. So one thing I do want to talk about, right, which is sure, uh, at the heart of what religion offered us was a means to have control over the uncontrollable. The tangibles that we got out of it, which is the architecture, the art, the poetry, the music, the songs, the and I'm not talking just about Christianity, across the religions, right? The expression of that religious fervor or that devotion has given us Sistine Chapel, has given us uh, so many more, has given us Hagia Sophia, has given us I could list n number
Mhm.
of, right, songs, all of that art, etc.
Notre Dame, so on, so on.
Yeah. I mean, the
Mhm.
list goes on, right? That is something we will always be indebted to religion for, even if, say, down the line, if the relevance of religion decreases with the increased relevance of science, hopefully, that is something we will be indebted to religion for, right? But as we go down the line, at least this is how I feel it. I'm like, hey, thanks for all this, but you are not relevant anymore. We know we have a lot more knowledge than our ancestors did. We cannot buy into these lies. So you are not as relevant. Thank you. So long, and thanks for all the
I don't
fish.
think it's going to happen for a couple of centuries, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think long after we're gone, its influence I thought had dwindled, but clearly there's been a resurgence of it over the last couple of years, where people are moving back towards a lot more traditional and religious values to govern their daily lives and to govern their countries, so to speak. Like the US is currently on about how it's a Christian nation, it needs to follow Christian values. In India, we're having the same thing with Hindu values. They're saying it's a Hindu nation, we must follow Hindu values. So you would think that, given the the nature of science and what we've managed to uncover in the last couple of centuries, all said and done, religion still holds a massive stranglehold on the powers that be today.
It does. And I am fully aware that this science, or scientific utopia that I'm talking about, is that it is a utopia, and by definition a utopia is a state of being that cannot practically be achieved. I understand that. And also, I don't know if I want that, right? Because all said and done, science is very objective, it is very cold, right? A purely scientific society uh, could also take very cold and calculated decisions which are devoid of humanity. Now, humanity is a very difficult to define quantity, right? What do I mean when I say humanity? It is that unspoken agreement we have that I will be nice to you, that I will help you out. I will take a little bit of pain because I have some affection for you. I don't know how science can quantify these things, right? If I were to take a stick, say for example, if tomorrow we live one road away, so this is a very relevant example. Say if tomorrow I'm on my way to the gym, and I see you've just fallen on the road, right? And I'm like, I'm late. So the scientific decision is to say he looks okay, he can pick himself up. I'm going to be late, so I have to go.
Mhm.
The humanity in me will be like, hey, it's okay if I'm a couple of minutes late. My friend has fallen down, right? Let me help him up. Let me make sure he's okay. Humanity lies in that nuance. If I were to call science as being very binary, right? It's a 0-1 thing. Either X is done or not done, right? It is in the gray area, in that fuzzy logic between the binary, is where humanity lies, philosophically speaking, right? Uh, and perhaps that's the one thing that science can never take away from religion, even though religion may fall back on unscientific principles. What science cannot take away from religion is its ability to inspire grace, its ability to inspire humility, fraternity, brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever you want to call it, right? All said and done, as much as I am singing praises of science, it is cold. And religion inspires warmth, uh, even if we don't have the capacity to generate it within ourselves, even if it's a little forced, right? Where the fear of God inspires, fear of God and God's retribution inspires you to be good people, whatever the reasons may be, right? The end result is that you are being better members of society. Those are things that science cannot replicate. So I am cognizant of the benefit that religious brings to us as better human beings. Unfortunately, that is, in today's world, like you said, of a small fraction of the kind of sentiment that religion inspires in us. I just, when I heard Lawrence's homily and given my own views on this topic, I just wanted to talk about this, right? And in fact, the movie ends on this note. To bring it back to the movie does talk about this note again without giving away spoilers. One of the key characters says, the Catholic Church is not about what we were; it is about what we will be in reaction to the developments of the world today. And that message is not just for the Catholic Church; it is for all religious bodies, right? Whether you like it or not, science is continuously going to demystify things. It is continuously going to pull the curtain on things you claimed to have control over, and people's view of you and people's view of religion in role of religion in their lives is continuously going to evolve. How are you going to deal with it?
When you have concrete answers to questions you thought religion were the only things that could answer. Religion was the only thing that could answer.
Yeah. So, and that in a sense is the message that the movie leaves us with, right? And pulpy as it may have been, or maybe I was predisposed to really go deep on these topics, but the fact that it triggered these thoughts in me, I think for those reasons I really enjoyed watching the movie, and
Mhm.
and it stayed with me for a couple of days after. Maybe not so much because of the screenplay or the script per se, but because of the themes it sort of brought up, and to tie it back to Berger as well, right? Speaking of the script, this is my 2 cents on him as a director. Um, the script is a function of the source material you adapt, right?
Yeah.
Both of his works so far are literary adaptations. Uh, and again, All Quiet on the Western Front is remarkably famous. Conclave maybe not so much, but both well received, right? So unless you really fuck up the adaptation, it would have been a good movie at the very least. What makes both these movies great is his treatment, right? That's Berger's X factor in cinematography, in music, in the framing, in the jump, the way scenes jump, all of that. The cues that he gives his actors, what sort of energy they need to bring, all of that is what Berger brings to the
It's a
table.
great testament of you could have a great story, but it's how you tell it that essentially dictates how it's received. Like, poorer
Yeah,
stories have been written and that have been masterfully told, and as a result have stood the test of time. I think here the source material is good, um, but it's the narration and it's essentially the direction of the entire film that makes it so compelling because he almost positions it like election night. It is, for all
it
intents and
is. Yeah.
purposes, an election, but it brings with it the tension and the and the doubt that comes with the elections of people mistrusting intentions and so on and so forth. It I think it made for very engaging viewing. It definitely brought up a lot of philosophical questions, especially when given that the main character himself is having to make the biggest decision uh, ever with regards to the church while having this conflict of faith within himself. I found to be extremely compelling viewing.
Yeah, no, I agree. So yeah, that was us and our discussion of the themes. Now coming to the last section. So for those of you who don't know, Abin has this annoying habit to try and talk about Gone Girl in the
All my
unlikeliest of
episodes.
yeah, in all the episodes, unlikeliest of discussions. So after a few attempts of him trying to sneakily do that, we decided, fuck it, let's just make this a section. So this is what we call 6 degrees of Gone Girl.
6 degrees of Gone Girl.
Where what we try to do is try and connect the movie that we're discussing to Gone Girl, hopefully within 6 steps or lesser. So, and we've not, neither of us has prepped on this. We're going to try and do this live. So let's go.
One eternity later.
Cool, cool, cool. Yes. Rare finds.
I think you
Did
have to say
he?
fast.
Yeah. Did he
One line.
share screen time with Judi Dench? Skyfall. So Skyfall, Judi
Yes.
Dench. Judi Dench. Die Another Day is the one with Rosamund Pike. Yes.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I
Yeah.
wasn't even
Die
thinking.
Another
Oh,
Day. Rosamund
that,
Pike.
that
Gone Girl.
that's it. That's Gone Girl. Damn, that's beautiful. I didn't even think of it. I was like, wow. My path was a little longer. I think you won already. So what I had was,
Yeah. I don't think it can get shorter than that.
yeah, what I had was Ray Fiennes and Liam Neeson, Schindler's List. Uh, Liam Neeson and Leo DiCaprio, Gangs of New York.
I can go back to Departed. Oh my god. Have you no
Departed
shame?
is the great connector. This will be the last time I use Departed.
Yeah, new rule, no more Departed. You only
No,
have to
but I think
find.
Departed is too easy. Departed is a cheat code.
Yeah, Departed is a cheat code. Or rather, if we don't get any other thing, we'll find. Departed is
Yes,
our fallback.
it's your last chance situation.
Yeah. And see, I didn't forget Matt Damon. I didn't even use Ben Affleck. I was like, let's
I
go
know,
the Rosamund Pike.
which is the insane bit. I was like, damn it! I should have like found a connection there. Man, I feel so dirty bringing up these topics, and after having the episode we've had, but it is what it is. That's us. I think we've come to the end. If you've stuck around till the end, please do give us your thoughts. I know religion generally is a very touchy subject. People are very protective about it, and I hope that for the most part we were able to address some of our concerns with it, while ensuring that you weren't offended.
Yeah.
To
I
a
hope
certain extent. I think that
I've tried.
our intention was to not offend. It was to educate.
Yeah, I've endeavored to be as respectful as possible while presenting my view. Feel free to disagree politely, please. That's all we
Yes.
ask.
Enough abuse we've got for 1 week.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's us for this week. We'll be back again next week. I think next week is the next couple of episodes will be such. We have to do Sinners, which is essentially the biggest film this year, and we need to talk about. We'll do a 1-2 of it with Nosferatu. Coming closer to home, Gangs of Wasseypur is on the cards. We have 2 guests lined up for that episode. So
Two
it's
guests,
going to be,
who is coming?
yeah. Both Aniket and Fala both joining. So it's going to be a lot
I
of
have
fun.
been behind Abhin for I think over a year at this point. Saying, when are we doing gangs? When are we doing gangs? When are we doing gangs?
I want to do Gangs. I just don't remember the second film, so I need to sit back and watch it. So my whole thing is when I get into these episodes, I watch a film through its entirety and then come back and so that my points remain fresh.
तुमसे ना हो पाएगा. हमें
No, I
तुम्हारे
see,
लक्षण बिल्कुल ठीक नहीं लग रहे. तुमसे ना हो पाएगा.
Anyway, that's one, and then of course, The Last of Us is concluding its run in about 2 to 3 weeks. We'll have an episode for that as well. I have to catch up. I'm 2 episodes behind, and I think we have one more left, which I'm forgetting. We have After Sun, which will be fun. It definitely is an episode I'm looking forward to.
Abhin is like, this Rohit has been jolly for too long. Let's fuck him up.
Please look at the episodes we have. We have one like sad episode. Everything else is happy.
Cool. Done.
Cool things.
Let's go.
Yes, please. If you made it this far, do like, share, and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, follow the podcast. Share it with your friends. Give us feedback if you like the format. If you don't like the format, if you think we are being a little too serious, please do tell us. Happy to like pivot and get sort of feedbacks and get feedback from our audience. We're
Yeah,
always
guys.
happy.
I'm usually not this serious. I try to be a little more funny on the other episodes. So
This is the most
if this was too serious,
polite he's been, yeah, which is very strange for me. I can't tell if
Yeah.
I'm too tired to judge or it's just him being polite.
no, I was like, hey, it's religion. There's just one masturbation joke in this episode. I think that's.
I'm very proud of you.
less for me.
I'm proud of you. We'll have like we'll have a board. I think currently
I'll make up for it. I'll make up for it in one of the Gangs of Wasseypur is there. No, bro, no worries. Chalo.
Okay, done. I'll have it. See you on the next one, everybody. Take care. Bye.